Alright guys, welcome to Math 0314. We are covering lesson 2.3, Slope-Intercept Form. So, what is Slope-Intercept Form? Slope-Intercept Form is of the format y equals mx plus b, and in this format, m represents the slope and b represents the y-intercept. So we've already talked about slope. The y-intercept, if we have a graph, is when the graph crosses the y-axis, right? That would be this point here when it crosses the y-axis. So usually, if I give you an equation, let's say I give you y equals 2x plus 1, then I know that if I start at 1, if the slope is 2, remember the slope of 2 is equal to 2 over 1, that means I would rise 2, run 1, and that would be another point. And we can continue this process. I can rise 2, I can run 1, I get another point. And the collection of all of those points is the line. For our sake, what we really need to do is we need to find we use the y-intercept to find one point, and then we use the slope to find the next point. And from just 2 points, you can always draw a line. So, in a nutshell, that's the effectiveness of it. If we think about it, we know also why that is going to be the case, right? Because when it crosses at x equals 0, then if I plug in 0 here, I would get a y value as 1, right? And then from there on, the 2 essentially represents that you're going to increase up. The y value will increase by a height of 2 every single time. So notice that the jump here is 2, the jump here is 2, the next jump is 2, etc., etc. Okay, so moving on. The first thing we're going to be asked to do is to rearrange the letters so that we can get, given an equation, can we get y by itself? So, and if hopefully you're asking why, and the answer of course is because we want to put in y equals mx plus b. So, let's take the equation 3x plus 4y equals 4, and let's think about how we would isolate for y. So hopefully the first move you're saying is I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides, which leaves me with 4y equals 2. Now I'm going to put the negative 3x in front, so negative 3x plus 4, and then I'm going to divide through by 4. And we're good to go. It's as easy as that. So typically that is what we're going to do. We're going to subtract 3x to the other side and then divide through by 4. So hopefully that makes sense. One little comment on this. This right here is called standard form. So sometimes they'll say convert from standard form to slope-intercept form. This of course is called slope-intercept form. Okay, so go ahead, pause the video, give this a shot, see if you can figure it out on your own. Go to assume you've done so, and now I'm going to solve it. So we're given 2x minus 4y equals 3. I'm going to isolate y, so subtract 2x. Just like over here, right? We subtracted 3x to get y by itself. So we're going to be left with negative 4y equals negative 2x plus 3. Just like over here, I rewrote it with the x in front so that it fits into y equals mx plus b. And then I'm going to divide through by negative 4. Note, I divide through by every term. And it's okay if it comes out to be a little ugly. These fractions are okay. And there's my answer. Moving right along. Now we're asked to graph. So remember, this value here represents b, and y equals mx plus b, and b is where it crosses the y-intercept. Now if my slope is negative 3 over 4, that means I'm going to drop 4, so drop 3, which is 1, 2, 3, and run 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And my point would be here. Connect the dots. And that would be my answer. So again, I dropped 3, and I ran 4, right? Because it's negative 3 over 4. So hopefully that makes sense. And just for some clarification here, I literally drew out the equation. So we can see here we dropped 3. Notice when we drop 3, we do end up this, it's hard to see, but this is negative 2, right? So when we drop 3, we are actually at negative 2, and then we run over 4. So hence you see the coordinate would be 4, negative 2, right? And there you have it. Okay, moving right along. Graph y equals 1/5 x minus 2. So go ahead, pause the video now, and see if you can figure out how to do this on your own. And I'm going to assume that you've done that. Let's graph it. So this means I'm going to start at negative 2, and this slope is 1 over 5, which means I'm going to rise 1, and I'm going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And draw my line. So here's the exact picture, looking a little nicer. So we can see here that we rise 1. Okay. My graph, note the way the Desmos does the graph, it's not in increments of 1. And then we run over 5. So this is up 1, and then we go over 5. 5 is right here. Okay, there you have it. Notice also that the slope is going up, the line is going up here because it is a positive slope, and whereas in the previous question it's going down because it's a negative slope. Alright, let's look at what's next. So determine whether the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So we remember that parallel means that the lines have equal slopes. Perpendicular means that they have opposite reciprocal. I encourage you to look, if you did not, look at the video where I proved why this is true. And then neither means if it doesn't fit into any of those. So we see here the slope. Remember the slope is m, and y equals mx plus b. We see the slope is negative 2. So they both have a slope of negative 2, which means they're parallel. When the slopes are the same, they're parallel. In B, they're trying to trick you by not putting in y equals mx plus b, but this is very easy to do so. Just divide through by 2. And we get the slope to be negative 3 over 2. On this one, we're going to add 4x to both sides, and we'll get 6y equals 4x minus 12. Then I'll divide through by 6. And y equals 2/3 x minus 2. So now I'll compare. I have 2/3 here. I have negative 3 over 2 here. So if we notice we flipped the signs and we flipped numerator and the denominator, which means they're perpendicular. That is what opposite reciprocal means. Perpendicular. That's a C-U-lar. Okay. Again, perpendicular means that you change the sign and that you've switched the position of the numerator and denominator. Okay. Next up, we have the C. Line 1 is x plus y equals 6, and then line 2 is y equals 6. So this one's a little different because the bottom equation only has y equals 6. So the first thing we're going to do is for the top one, subtract x from both sides. We'll get y equals negative x plus 6. And then we have y equals 6. So, how do we deal with this? Well, one way is to look at a graph. So, if I sketch a graph of the first one, it'll look something like so. If I graph the second one, y equals 6, now this is where you have to remember from the previous class, y equals 6 is a line that crosses like so. It's the collection of all the points that have a y value of 6. All the y values here are going to be 6. So it's a horizontal line. If you look at this, you can see clearly they're not parallel. And hopefully you know you've answered why in your mind. The parallel lines do not touch. They're not perpendicular. And it's clear that they're not perpendicular because the line that would be perpendicular to a horizontal line would be a vertical line, right? So they're not perpendicular, so the answer here is neither. So we'll take a look at D. I kind of gave you the answer to D already. If you think about it, pause the video, give a shot, draw a picture, see what you get. Hopefully you've done that. Let's look at what we got here. So we have x equals 2. I'm going to do x isn't going to be in gray, so here's 2. So x equals 2 goes up and down at 2. Y equals 3. That's going to be a horizontal line at 3. So earlier I said it would be perpendicular if it was if you have a horizontal line, if you have a vertical line. Here, both of these are horizontal and vertical, so they have to be perpendicular. Notice here I'm using intuition and really just drawing a picture to visualize what's going on, to see that it's perpendicular. So don't just have yourself as default always just this is the rule and I have to apply this rule. If you struggle with something, draw a picture, visualize, think about it. A lot of times you can figure out what the answer is just by thinking about it. Moving right along. Okay, so what about if they're both x's? Go ahead, pause the video now, draw a picture, see what you think the answer is. I'm going to assume that you've done so. My picture would look, we have two x graphs go up and down. So we are going to have two lines at 2 and then 3. Clearly these are parallel. And by the same logic, hopefully you have the answer here, you don't need to draw a picture, but if you did, you would have two lines at 7 and 8, and these also would be parallel. So if you just think about it, draw a picture, these problems won't be difficult at all. Okay, moving right along. Yeah, okay. Find an equation with the slope 2 going through -3, -5. So with these questions, this is really the nuts and bolts of what we're going to be doing. Anytime you see a new concept in math, we usually discuss some sort of equation. Our equation is y equals mx plus b. We're going to use this equation to figure out the answer. So what do we know? Well, I told you the slope is 2. What letter represents slope? M represents slope. So slope is 2. It goes through x comma y. So we know x is -3, right? And y is -5. And then we solve for b. So add 6 to the other side. And b is 1. So if I know b is 1, my slope is 2, then the equation is simply what? Y equals 2x plus 1. So let's keep this going. The next one, find equation with a slope -3 going through 1, -4. So to do this, again, the equation is y equals mx plus b. And go ahead now, pause the video and try to figure it out on your own. I'm going to assume that you've done so. So hopefully what you did is you said the slope is -3, the x component is 1, the y component is -4, and we just solve. So -4 equals -3 plus b. Add 3 to the other side. -1 equals b. So the equation is y equals -3x minus 1. And there's my answer. Okay, keep it going. The next question I have is, what is point-slope form? Okay, so there's this equation that emerges, which is y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. And this is called point-slope form. Well, first thing I want you to realize, this should look eerily familiar to m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, the slope formula. Notice that if I multiply through by x2 minus x1 on both sides, these will cancel out. And essentially, this equation is very similar to that. And that's actually where point-slope form comes from. So why am I talking about point-slope form? Well, on the previous questions, I solved the previous questions using y equals mx plus b, but we can actually do this using point-slope form. So for example, if the slope is 2 and it goes through -3, -5, the slope is 2, and it goes through -3, -5. What I can do, make sure I wrote that right, yep, is if I use y minus y1 equals mx minus x1, I can simply substitute in the values. And then solve. So we'll, negative becomes a positive, negative becomes a positive, and we'll distribute 2. We'll subtract 5. And you can see that y equals 2x plus 1 and y equals 2x plus 1 are the same. So both methods work. I'm actually a bigger fan of the initial one for two reasons. One, I think it's faster, and two, I just need to use y equals mx plus b, which we already have in our head. But the book tends to like to do this, and a lot of books and professors do enjoy going about doing these problems this way. I don't care at the end of the day. The advantage of this is that there's no like substituting back into equations. You just solve and get y by itself. But the disadvantage is you have to memorize a formula, and I think it gets a little more cumbersome with distribution. And but yeah, you guys pick the method that makes you happy. Okay, so let's move on. For the time being, I'm going to solve these using y equals mx plus b. Again, if you prefer using point slope form, go ahead. Also, the book solves the problem, so you can pull up the book solutions. It has these problems, and you can solve them in the book. The book format uses point slope form. So you have that as a back. If you do want me to solve these using point slope form, just let me know, and you can either put a comment or you can email me directly, and I will post videos using point slope form. But moving right along, let's go ahead and solve this. Find an equation of a line passing through 5, -1 and 3, 1. So now I've given you 2 points. So how do I use y equals mx plus b? Remember, I said you always want to write down the equation that you're going to use and think about how you can figure things out. Well, we know that this can be x1, this can be y1, this can be x2, and this can be y2. And if that's true, then I can use m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. In other words, if I give you 2 points, you can clearly find the slope, right? So we're going to go ahead and do that. So y minus -1 over 3 minus 5. Again, all I'm doing is from the previous class. We're just mapping these up. 1 plus 1 over -2. So this becomes 2 over -2, which is -1. I am going to, once I've talked about a concept, I will kind of zip through that concept in the next video. However, again, if I'm doing something too fast or if it's not being clear, let me know. I'll make another video. Okay, so we get the slope to be -1. So now we know that m is -1, but what about x and y? Well, you have points. These points are x and y, so you can pick which one you want to use. I'm going to use 3, 1 because they're both positive, and just plug them in. So if x is 3, I'm going to have -1 times 3 here, -1 times 3, and then the y value is 1, so this y value is going to be 1, and then we're going to solve for b. So let's go ahead and do that. So 1 equals -3 plus b. I'm going to add 3 to the other side. And b is 4. So what is my equation? Y equals, remember the slope is -1. X, my b value is 4. And just to be clear here, all I'm doing is plugging back into y equals mx plus b. And there you have it. So if you're given 2 points, find the slope, you get the slope, and then you're right back to what we've been doing from back here. These sort of questions. So hopefully that's not too bad. Just added one little extra step. So go ahead, pause the video now, give this a shot, see if you can figure it out, and we'll talk about it in a sec. Okay, so hopefully you've paused the video, you've given it a shot. Remember the equation is y equals mx plus b, but because I'm giving you 2 points, I'm going to use y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to label this x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to map my y's and my x's together, and we're going to substitute it in. So negative 1 minus 2 over negative 1 minus negative 5. This is going to be negative 3. Negative negative becomes a positive, so this is 5 minus 1, which is 4. So my slope is negative 3/4. Cool. All right, now I'm going to use points here. Now, both of these have negatives, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this one because the numbers are smaller. So m is negative 3/4. We just calculated that. X is negative 1. And y is also negative 1. So let's clean it up. So negative times negative is a positive, so we have 3/4 plus b equals negative 1. I'm going to go ahead here, and there's a lot of different ways of doing this. I'm going to subtract 3/4. I think it's easy enough to subtract this because 1 is just 4 over 4. So negative 4 minus 3 is going to give me negative 7 over 4, which is b. So what's my equation? My slope is negative 3/4. My y-intercept is negative 7/4. And there we have it. So hopefully that makes sense. Moving right along. Find the equation passing through negative 2, negative 3, and parallel to 4x plus y equals 8. Okay, so what's important here is with this equation, the only thing that matters with this equation is the slope. Okay, so how do I find the slope here? I subtract negative 4x from both sides. Y equals negative 4x plus 8. And from here, I know the slope is negative 4. Now, what most students do when they struggle with these questions is they somehow try to use the rest of this problem to solve the problem. Use the rest of this equation to solve the problem. The issue here is that all I care about is that my line that I'm about to write, the equation of the line, is parallel to this. So all I care about is that the slope is negative 4. So now I know m is negative 4. I have the point negative 2, negative 3. And I can use y equals mx plus b to solve this. So I'm just going to substitute back in. M is negative 4. Y is negative 3. X is negative 2. I'm going to solve for b. So negative 3 equals 8 plus b. Subtract 8. Negative 11 is b, so y equals negative 4x minus 11. And there we have it. So what did we do here? We used the equation to find the slope. Right? It's parallel, so it has the same slope. And then we solved using the previously learned technique in order to get to the answer. Cool beans. All right. Go ahead now, if you haven't done so already, pause the video, try to do this one on your own. So I'm going to assume that you've paused the video, how to go with it. So we're going to take 2x equals y minus 7, and we're going to solve this. So what I want to do is I want to get y by itself. Now, y is on the right side, that's fine. I'm going to actually add 7, and we get 2x plus 7 equals y, because the goal is to isolate y. It doesn't matter if it's on the left or the right. We're used to seeing it written like this. So if you want to, just switch the position. That's perfectly fine. And you're good to go. So this is parallel. Parallel means that the slopes are the same. So we know m is 2. It's going through the point 4, negative 1. So it's going through the point 4, negative 1. We know what to do. hop on to y equals mx plus b. Substitute in the values. We know x is 4, y is 1, so x is 4, y is -1, m is 2, and solve. You know what, let me do that in a different color. So -9 is b, so the equation is y equals 2x minus 9, and there's my answer. So, just read carefully, just use the equation to find the slope, nothing else, and once you have the slope, they give you always a point, you can find your equation. Okay, so we're going to go back now and we're going to redo number 10 with perpendicular. So, as we recall in number 10, that we know the slope is -4, right? But now we want something perpendicular. So perpendicular means we have opposite reciprocal slopes. So what's the opposite reciprocal of -4? Change the sign, flip the position of x and y, so we have 1/4, and it's still going through the point -2, -3. So we're going to do the same thing with 1/4, going through the point -2 and -3. So go ahead, pause the video now, try this on your own, see if you can get this all by yourself. You should be able to if you've been working through the other problems. And what do? Y equals mx plus b. The slope is 1/4. The x is -2. The y is -3. And we're going to solve for b. So here we're going to multiply. We're going to get -2/4, which reduces to 1/2. If that's okay, I get -1/4 times -2 over 1 gives me -2/4, which becomes -1/2, equals -3. I'm going to go ahead and just add 1/2. This is like adding 0.5 to -1. I don't think that's too hard to do. That's going to be -2.5, which is b. Usually they don't like to write this as a as a mixed number, so there's a method called the Texas method to switch a mixed number into a fraction, and this is, you multiply these together, it gives you 2 times 2 is 4, and then you add this 1 and it gives you 5, so this is the same thing as -5/2 is b. You could also say -3/1 plus 1/2 and convert this into 2 and 2, so you have -6/2 plus 1/2. So now that the denominators are the same, subtract the numerators, we get -5/2. So that's another way you could do it. In any case, the answer to this question now is going to be 1/4 x minus 5/2. That's my equation. So perpendicular just means you take the slope, do the opposite reciprocal, and you're good to go. So go ahead, guys, look at number 13. 13 is the same thing, all I'm going to do with number 11. Let's go to number 11. So go ahead now. Here's number 11. The slope was 2. The point is 4, -1. Real fast, answer to this question. What is the opposite reciprocal slope of 2? Hopefully you said -1/2, right? Flip and negate. And the point that we used was 4, -1. So go ahead, pause the video, try this on your own, see if you can do this on your own. I'm going to assume you've done so. The equation is y equals mx plus b. We're going to substitute in the values, -1/2, x is 4, y is -1. Sorry if I'm rushing, I got about a minute to finish this. Multiply this out, I get -2 equals -1 plus b, and add 2 to the other side. So 1 is b. So my equation is y equals -1/2 x plus 1. If that's too fast, let me know and I'll make another video. Okay, so I still have 14 and 15 to go through. Go ahead, see if you can figure out how to do this. This is 14, this is 15. And I'll make a follow-up video for this, and we'll compare answers. So good luck, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.